Hey guys, it's me, EODGamer here, and let's dive into Dr. Ratio's build guide video. Now, before we talk about all the optimal stats to focus on, I just want to share with you transparently some gossip that's going on the street. There is a rumor that there's possibly going to be a new relic set that's going to be very good for Dr. Ratio in 2.0, Panacony and beyond. I can't validate that, but if any of you have any of your dreams or whatnot, you want to comment as well, feel free to leave in the comment section below. But let's jump into the build guide for 1.6. Any of these, if there's a future build guide, just take the main stats. That will be more or less the important thing. We'll probably do an updated one in future if there ever is new sets coming out. So first things first, what do I recommend? I think a 4-piece Wastelander or Banditry Desert probably would be Dr. Ratio's best set. The reason because is he benefits a lot from having attacking debuff enemies in his overall kit. And this plays in very nicely with that. It gives him the imaginary damage that he needs, gives him the debuff when you're attacking enemies by basically 10% crit rate increase. If you play with a character like Ronmei, for example, maybe you have a chance to imprison them for slightly longer, then you get this 20% additional bonus. But otherwise, 10% crit rate for a 4-piece, very, very good value. So that'll be my first recommendation. For any of you who are not looking to min-max farm a godlike 4-piece, I would actually recommend you maybe go for a 2-piece imaginary damage bonus, and maybe you can focus on, for example, a 2-piece speed set, because this can transition very nicely later on. If you slowly farm new gear, you are able to transition over to a 2-piece of an old set to a 2-piece of a new set, and then slowly transfer everything to a 4-piece. That is my recommendation if there might be a new set coming out in future as well. Just want to give you that disclaimer for full transparency purposes. Now, Planet Ornament Synthesis. I think this one is where it gets a little bit varied. He's a character that has a bit of follow-up attacks and also does enjoy quite a lot of crit damage in his overall kit. In that sense, Inert Salsoto is quite attractive because it gives him nice crit rate and it's only a 50% threshold, and he increases the out damage that he has and follow-up attack damage that he has. However, he's a character that does like to use a bit of skill, so I think Rutaland Arena is also quite attractive because of this additional 20% skill damage that he also gets. In my opinion, I am leaning towards Inert Salsoto as of 1.6 a little bit more compared to Rutaland Arena because the threshold is a little bit higher depending on whether you hit it or not. His skill does give him some extra crit rate, which means that you might not be building him for this much crit rate all of the time, and there might be some inefficiencies here and there if you are trying to reach certain threshold. But by and large, I think Inert Salsoto and Rutaland Arena is more or less the same. I prefer Inert Salsoto a little bit more. Two other options I'll give you. For crit rate, crit damage kind of builds, I always like Broken Kill. Any character that can crit likely will find good value with Broken Kill because you also buff your other DPSs. For example, you're playing Imbibiter Lune plus Dr. Ratio. In that sense, you're giving the 10% to Dr. Ratio as well. You're playing Bronya, you give the 10% crit damage to Bronya. It's a very nice scaling crit damage effect. So this is the other set that I'll use, Broken Kill. I'll share with you the relics that I'm using now. I prepared it now, it's haven't been released yet, but this is my Susang. She's a proxy for my Dr. Ratio, and this is the relics that I'm running. I'm personally running a 4-piece Banditry of Desert as well as Broken Kill when I'm going to be testing and reviewing him for you guys once he comes live. So this is the set that I'm using, and what are the main stats that I'm focusing on? I'll give you some options too. For the body, I'm personally using a crit damage body. I think that he gets a lot of crit rate already. Hunt characters generally have massive amounts of crit rate in their tracers. Dr. Ratio likely going to be the same. You have a lot of access to crit rate stuff. For example, this 4-piece set gives a lot of crit rate here and there. In that sense, crit damage is the very nice balancing factor, especially if you are using a crit rate Lightcone. If you are using sword play and stuff, maybe if you don't get crit rate, you can find it here. But basically, this is just a stat balancer. Use whatever you need more of. I personally think for Dr. Ratio, leans more towards crit damage. For the boot, I think speed is very nice for him if you're not playing with a character like Bronya to push him up. Of course, you could argue that if you are able to use his out very, very often and keep up, for example, the uptime and the follow-up attacks, attack percentage might be fine as well. But if you don't have a Huo battery and keeping up the uptime for Dr. Ratio, I think speed might give him a bit more value, since if he acts more often, it also gives him more energy restoration for him as well. Hitting more often is not a bad thing too. So I personally choose speed because I don't want to be restrained towards playing with only Bronya teams or only with Huo kind of teams. I want him a bit more versatile too. That is my thoughts for the main stat, but speed, attack percentage, I think both works fine. Planisphere, very simple. I think Imagine damage bonus is probably his best in slot. Link Rope, In my opinion, I think attack percentage is going to be the best. Some people might say energy restoration rate, but I don't think a character that doesn't... He's not like a character, for example, like ReiniBlue, who is dependent very heavily on his rotations. If not, there's a huge amount of downtime. He is more of a character that's like a lot more independent. He can use his skill, he can use his ult, doesn't matter as much. And with a very high amount of burst cost, that 20% might not make a significant difference compared to the attack percentage that you're losing or gaining. So I think I'll go with attack percentage, but I can see a case for both too. And last but not least, of course, I don't like Imaginary Break. If you guys haven't seen the Imaginary Break video, do check it out on the channel. I compare like what happens if you add more break effect on imaginary characters. Long story short, it's not very fantastic. So that is for Relics main stats as well. Let's talk about the next interesting thing. It's Lightcones. Which one do I think is very good for him? And of course, I'm not going to be talking about his signature Lightcone. This is before like it's officially been released. I'll have more videos on that for his signature Lightcone. If you care about that, check it out on the channel. This is of course more options for free to play because his signature Lightcone is probably going to be his best in slot by quite a large margin. So there's not much point talking about it in build section. You probably already know that. First things first. Free to play, cruising in the Stellar Sea, everyone has this Lightcone. At Super in position 5, it gives you a lot of crit rate, 16%. That's why I said like crit damage body is a lot more valuable. You get a massive amount of crit rate here, 16%, and you get an extra 16% half the time. Because if the enemy boss is like below 50% of HP and stuff, you do get an additional 16%. 32% crit rate is very ridiculously high. This last part here is a nice bonus. You defeat enemy attack is increased by some amounts. Cruising in the Stellar Sea, very solid free-to-play option. What other options can he play? I think something that might be quite interesting to play is actually Return to Darkness. This is of course a Battle Pass Lightcone for the game. It means it's like pay-to-play because it gives you crit rate, some crit rate, and if you do a crit, you are actually able to dispel buff. This is very nice for characters who are like secondary damage dealers. Very good on characters like Topaz. I think Dr. Ratio might do the same as well, because you are able to turn your Hun DPS into a Dispeller, which might be very useful next time when there is more enemies with buffing capabilities that keep buffing themselves. So keep that option open, might be an option for future. But other than that, let's talk about the other 4 stars, and then we will speak about the other 5 stars. Maybe especially this Yanting one in a little bit too, in case any of you have that. Only silent risk remains. I don't really like it too much. 2 or fewer enemies is hardly the chance. You get a lot more of these like 24% crit rate versus your 16% guaranteed for the other one, where this Cruising the Stellar Sea. I don't really like it too much, this one here. The one that I probably like more is like Sword Play. Each time you hit the target at the same time, damage increases by 16%, stacking up to 5 times. Hun characters use this quite well generally. We have to see exactly how much it hits, but I would say that this does okay too, especially if he's like continuously hitting the same target. And the only downside to this one is probably doesn't have crit rate, which means you might need to balance your stats a little bit more, because it's quite a lot of crit that you're missing out if you're going for Cruising in the Stellar Sea. Subscribe for more, and you guys should subscribe for more definitely. But this one I also don't really too fancy this. He does do a lot of damage from follow abilities, so this one is not very useful because this is mainly basic attack and skill. And if you have his out, you probably will be using it rather than hitting with it. So not too good. River Flows in Spring. This is actually probably okay for him. You increase the speed by 12% and damage by 24%. That's if of course you have some sort of like shielder for him. I can see this as quite okay. He doesn't have too much self buffing capabilities for speed. Generally quite a slow hunt moving characters versus the other hunt characters. So I see this as okay if he doesn't get hit. And last but not least, let's talk about this one. Sleep Like the Dead. It increases the wearer's crit damage by 30%. This 30% is nice since he actually has quite a lot of crit rate in his kit, especially if you have a godlike crit rate body and you do not have like a crit damage one that is godlike. This could be a nice stat balancer because it allows you to still run some crit rate in your body. You slap this on, you get that crit damage here to help balance your stats as well. And when a wearer's basic attack or skill does not result in a crit hit, you increase their crit rate by 36% for one whole turn. This effect can only trigger once every 3 turns, which is just like a nice addition, but mainly is for the 30% stat balancer as well as the 5-star stats, because 582 here, attack percentage, compared to 529 is a massive difference in attack percentage for a DPS that scales generally with attack percentage as well. So that is my thoughts on Lightcones. If you have In the Night, I think definitely this is going to be a lot better. It has a lot of crit rate. You might not be able to get the full speed as well, but it's generally useful on a lot of Huynh characters. Some people consider this one of the strongest Huynh Lightcones, and similarly it can be used for Doctor Ratio too. Worrisome Blissful is also very decent because it allows you to have this follow attack proccing, which Doctor Ratio is also able to use. So he's one of the characters that can use a lot of the limited Lightcones. But I wouldn't elaborate more because if you probably have the limited Lightcones, you wouldn't be that concerned about looking at resource management as well in your Lightcone section and what to exactly use. So that aside, last thing to talk about for pre-prep is what team compositions do we want for Doctor Ratio. I am going to use Susang here as a proxy for Doctor Ratio just because my gear slept on her. But let's talk about some team comps, real quick ones, and we will have another guide video more fully later on. I think one interesting one that a lot of people are talking about is a Topaz as well as a Doctor Ratio. This can be quite interesting, especially since she does a lot of follow-up attacks. Doctor Ratio also benefits a lot and does some follow-up attacks here and there. You want to put, for example, Huo in this slot where you give them energy and a buffer that benefits everyone in the entire team. It could be Runmei, for example, like this. I think this is an attractive team to consider. Rather expensive. If you guys are interested in more combinations of team comps or more free-to-play team comps, we will talk more in the next guide coming up. I hope you found the build guide video helpful. Like and subscribe for more of such future content. Let me know in the comments below. Are you going to build your Doctor Ratio? Are you just here for support? Either way, thank you guys so much for watching. See you next video.